Welcome to the DVERT Brief. I'm Dr. Meg McBride, Director of the Domestic Violent Extremism Research and Translation Center at CNA. This podcast series highlights new research, trends, and findings on violent extremism in America. Designed for policymakers, practitioners, and anyone curious about the evolving domestic threat landscape, this AI-generated podcast delivers concise and accessible summaries of our latest work. Thanks for listening.
In today's episode, we'll be exploring key insights from our report, BTAM, Pros and Cons of Different Cadences. Let's dive in.
Okay, so today we're talking about BTAM. That's Behavioral Threat Assessment and Management. It's a systematic, fact-based process for assessing potential threats. The whole idea is, if you can spot and manage concerning behaviors early on, you stand a much better chance of preventing acts of targeted violence.
Okay, so let's get into the core issue here. I understand federal guidance says these BTAM teams, they have to be multidisciplinary, they need to meet regularly, and they should have a low threshold for activation. But, and this seems key, the guidance doesn't specify how often they should meet or exactly how low that threshold should be. So the feds say you need to do this, but leave the how often and how intensely totally open. It's a huge decision for, say, a local school to make on its own.
It absolutely is. And that ambiguity highlights the need to provide better guidance for small school and county-level BTAM teams, especially when these teams get the mandate to operate, but may not, receive dedicated funding or specific operational-level guidelines. And as you can imagine, there's quite a spectrum.
Right, and the report highlights these two extremes. So on one side, you've got what you call the really inclusive approach, very proactive. One school doing something like 50 threat assessments a year, which is what, one assessment for every 29 students at that school? That sounds intense.
It is, and it meant they had to meet weekly just to keep up with the caseload.
Weekly meetings, wow. Okay, and the other end of the spectrum?
That was the exclusive approach, much more reactive. We saw another school in the same county, they only did 2 formal assessments all year.
2 compared to 50?
Exactly. About 1 for every 284 students at that school. They really reserved the formal BTAM process for only the most severe, maybe imminent threats.
And handled other concerns differently?
Yeah, more informally. Maybe guidance counseling, that sort of thing, outside the formal BTAM structure.
Okay, let's break down that first model, the inclusive, high-frequency one. What are the upsides?
Well, the big pro is definitely early intervention. You're catching things much sooner, potentially before they escalate.
Right. Identifying kids who need help.
Exactly. Stakeholders we talked to really liked that it helped identify students who might need mental health support or help with learning differences, things that weren't necessarily violent threats but still barriers.
And it helped them avoid just jumping to suspension or expulsion.
Precisely. They saw it as providing support, not just discipline.
But there have to be downsides to assessing so many kids.
Oh, absolutely. The main one is resources. It's incredibly time-consuming. Think about the counselors, the school resource officers, administrators.
It's a big drain.
A huge strain. And then there's the potential risk of stigma. Are you labeling a student who's maybe just struggling with anxiety as a potential threat by putting them through this formal process?
That's a tricky line to walk. Privacy concerns too, I imagine. More data being collected.
Definitely. Increased scrutiny means more data collection, which always raises privacy questions.
Okay, so that leads us to the other side, the exclusive high-threshold approach. Less frequent meetings, fewer formal assessments. What's the benefit there?
Well, the primary advantage is you reduce that risk of kind of over-stigmatizing lower-risk students unnecessarily.
Okay, fewer kids potentially labeled.
Right, and maybe just as importantly, it massively lessens the workload on those key personnel. The SROs, the counselors. It saves them a significant amount of time and effort.
Which are often already stretched thin in schools. But the risk there seems obvious. What if you miss something?
That's the big cost. Yeah, you risk a concerning case slipping through the cracks because it doesn't quite meet that very high bar for a formal assessment. And there's another cost too. If teams hardly ever activate, they don't get the chance to practice. They lose opportunities to use their training, refine how they work together, build that operational muscle memory.
So they might be rusty when a serious case does come up.
Potentially, yes. Less experienced, less refined processes.
So boiling this all down for, the policymakers, the practitioners listening, what's the takeaway? It sounds like there's no single right answer here.
That's exactly it. There isn't one perfect path. Both the inclusive and the exclusive models, they have real, valid trade-offs baked right in.
So you can't just pick one and forget it.
No, absolutely not. The critical thing, the main implication here, is that teams must make an intentional decision. You have to consciously choose your cadence, your threshold.
And keep revisiting it.
Constantly. You need to look at your resources, the specific needs of your students, your school environment, and crucially, get feedback from everyone involved. Ask your partners, is this actually working effectively?
It has to be a deliberate, ongoing process, not just setting a policy once.
Precisely. Intentionality and continuous evaluation are key.
This podcast was produced with the assistance of artificial intelligence tools, but the content was based on research done by the DVERT Center, which is housed within CNA, a nonprofit research and analysis organization dedicated to advancing the safety and security of the nation. The research on which this podcast is based was supported by the Department of Homeland Security Science and Technology Directorate. Adaptation of this research for the DVERT Brief was supported by the National Institute of Justice. The views and conclusions contained in this podcast are those of the authors and should not be interpreted as necessarily representing the official policies, either expressed or implied, of DHS, S&T, or the National Institute of Justice.